Uhuru Ruto MPs fight the neutrals. Tension and hostility between MPs who either support Uhuru and Ruto in current Jubilee standoff over 2022 escalate, with focus turning to legislators who have chosen to be neutral. The story continues on page 6. But there's a quote there, Ahmed Nasir, what president must do to win the war against graft. Well-connected and outspoken lawyer argues corruption cases in court are weak and reveals he told President Uhuru to fight graft through lifestyle audit, starting with owners of the 120 choppers at Wilson Airport. That's what he claims. And this is a subject that we've spoken about 1,000,001 times, but we always have different guests for it. Let's find out. So from them, and Jerotich, I'll start with you. So what do you make of the fight against graft? Is it going to be won? Is this just lip service? Then the lifestyle audit that Ahmed Nasir is talking about, is that a starting point?
Thanks, Trevor. Actually, the lifestyle audit that was ordered, I think, sometime last year has never taken place. I think it is lip service. When you say the war against corruption or the war against graft, where is it? I don't see it, except in writing, except in nice little sound bites and words. But in actual fact, when we look at the eye-watering amounts of monies that have been stolen, siphoned out of the government coffers over the years through shady deals and cartel-driven arrangements, you know that there's absolutely no fight against corruption ongoing, despite what His Excellency the President has said, despite everything that government is trying to do, or even to deny, whether it's the dams, whether it's in the energy sector, there is no fight against corruption.
You're not happy with the list we've seen from the DPP, people going to the integrity center? It's just a revolving door.
As far as I'm concerned, I think the DPP and DCI have a history of bungling cases, and so the investigation are never done well enough or thoroughly enough, or there's always some kind of technical loophole, and as soon as it ends up with the DPP, something else happens. Look what happened to the NYS team. The case went, it was loud, there was a lot of noise, and it eventually fizzled out and disappeared. So we are seeing, in my opinion, a trend where the fight against graft, the fight against corruption fizzles out somewhere along the way. And because we're so busy chasing the next scandal, we forget that the previous one hasn't been effectively dealt with.
Irungi Houghton, you've come here many times to have this particular discussion. Let's think hypothetically, between the last time you were here last year at a time like this and today, has anything changed in the discussion around corruption? Because she says there's no war on corruption, so let's talk about the discussion around corruption.
So first of all, just Wahiga, thank you very much for bringing me on your show, particularly with Sam Kimeo, because usually I get confused either as Amnesty International and Transparency International. You have given your viewers no opportunity for that this morning, so we're both here. Now, of course, Amnesty International, we work mostly on human rights abuses, and corruption is a major accelerator of the denial of human rights services, either in the case of health or education or other services. It is also a driver in terms of abuse of office and impunity. So it is an area that Amnesty is very concerned about, but from a slightly different angle. I think over the last year or so, I think I would probably disagree that there have been some steps forward. And I always, with such an avalanche of corruption cases, I always say that we have to look for hooks and levers that give us a sense that there is some traction happening. So there are a couple of things. More arrests are happening. More processing and investigations are taking place, and we have lists of this that are very different from last year. The lifestyle audits did take place. It's not that they didn't take place, but there was a fatal flaw in the lifestyle audits, which is that they were never made public. And that's where
the regular lifestyle audit you're talking about, or a special one around what the president ordered? The
civil service went through lifestyle audits last year, and my concern with them was really that they were never made public, and particularly for the more senior, state officers, that we were not given the opportunity to actually do this work. If you remember, Kenyans on Twitter, I forget what the hashtag was, but we actually spent a lot of time beginning to take photographs of people's homes and people's assets and people's, I
remember that, yes.
And I felt there was an opportunity for the Director of Criminal Investigation to use all that evidence to begin to actually ask people, not just simply for pieces of paper, but for evidence of where those assets have come from. And I think that's where the conversation goes through. The one other thing that I want to mention is that we have seen seizure of assets to some extent. So you have seen a number of cases. I think over the weekend, the newspapers were quite graphic in terms of the numbers of assets that have been seized or bank accounts that have been frozen. And, you know, as we've been seeing, the former Nairobi governor of court, the former Nairobi governor is going to have his day in court. So I think there are certain things that should leave us, I sense, with less of a sense of cynicism and resignation, but more of an appetite and an anger that the fight against corruption is not going fast enough and it is not leading to convictions. And that's where I agree probably with my colleague here.
Yes, Steve, you're part of the judiciary, and one of the things that Ahmed Nasir is talking about is he says that cases in court are weak, and that's the reason why they keep failing.
Well, I think first of all, for clarity and for the avoidance of doubt, there is no fight on corruption going on. At best, you have a corruption perception crisis management. Corruption is fought at the ballot. You cannot bring people into leadership through a corrupt infrastructure. I mean, it turns logic on its head to expect people who got elected on a corrupt infrastructure to disrupt the very system that they ride on. So corruption is best fought at the ballot in the first place. In the second place, be it as it may, because now we have a government in place, corruption is best fought through political accountability. At best, the entire government should have resigned if this president and this administration was serious about waging war on graft. What Ahmed Nasir is suggesting is window dressing, the kind of suggestion that will not work and that will only keep Kenyans busy and going around. There is no formula why he should start with the choppers that are owned. There are Kenyans who have lost money, Kenyans have lost money and services through the various scandals that you can't even imagine the magnitude of them. I think if the president is firm and decisive in rehabilitating, I'm talking about rehabilitating his image, because this administration, if you are to speak truth to it, this administration is corrupt through and through, all the way from State House. There's no doubt about that. If you want to excuse the president and the administration and the presidency, then you will not even be honest in a discussion about fighting graft. Be it as it may, if the president can take decisive action, see the way government is organized. Government is organized alongside ministries, semi-autonomous state agencies. There are figureheads there. They can roll. In terms of re-establishing the perception that the government is serious. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about criminal culpability, and Kenyans must distinguish between criminal culpability, which is the judicial process. I'm talking about political accountability, releasing people, firing people, because under Article 231, the president can fire. He can fire officers in the public service, he can fire cabinet secretaries, he can fire principal secretaries, send them home, if only to re-establish the perception. The judiciary is a third and distant option in the war against graft. It presupposes that generally you have a public service that is good and decent. People who are not open to manipulation, they're not open to theft and wastage, then you can arrest the few and teach them a lesson. Yeah. But where the entire system is pervasive, corruption is pervasive in the entire system, how many people can you charge? You know, technically, Trevor, it is possible to charge the deputy president. It is possible to charge the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, although he's not a state officer. It's possible to charge even the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, Leader of Minority, Leader of Majority in National Assembly and the Senate. But in reality, can you really charge all these people with corruption?
Look at the political
you can't.
You say corruption is primarily fought at the ballot.
Yeah. Yes.
Kenyans get a chance to go to the ballot once every 5 years. And are you saying they missed their shot, and if they did, there is nothing more they can do?
Or is the
until another 5 years rolls over?
Waiga, everybody who lives in this country knows that our politics is organized around ethnic solidarity. I mean, Irungu here and some, they organized a red card campaign. Nobody listened. They said, there are people that have pending cases, integrity questions. Some attempted to implement what was calling social vetting. Kenyans don't listen. They are mobilized along ethnic lines. They are mobilized along other unknown, along lines that are not authorized or ordained by the Constitution. Then when you have people who are thieves and thugs getting into offices and they start stealing and wasting public resources, then you come back and start demanding that they wage a war on corruption. Okay. I mean, this is not how to vacate common sense.
I'll come back to you because you've talked about unknown lines. Hang on, let's get an opening statement from him and then we can continue. And of course, Transparency International Index, War on Corruption. Some have talked about window dressing, perception that we're actually fighting corruption when we're not. I'm curious to know, when we look forward to the next release of Kenya's data, might we see a more favorable result for the country, or is it just window dressing, as some have put it?
Well, thank you very much. I really don't have an inkling into what the statistics will look like. I can only give a view.
There's no way to predict.
Yeah, I can only give a view based on what I see. And what I see is that as a country, what the fight against corruption, in my view, is more of an intent expressed than actually being done. And I say this because I share the views of a lot of my colleagues here, that I ask myself, if in truth we have a fight against corruption that is spirited, concerted, why is it that we neglect the pillars of an effective fight against corruption? And we have written, I personally have written this over the last 10 years, that lifestyle audits are the most potent weapon that you have in the hands of anyone engaged in the fight against corruption. Why? Because people engage in corrupt conduct because of the incentives or the benefit that comes from it. We define corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. So that gain, that private gain, is really what we should be focusing on. And if we focused on that, then we would realize that lifestyle audits occupy a central position in any successful fight against corruption in this country. And like Irungu, I have not seen the lifestyle audits. I have only heard that they will be done, starting with, initially it was supposed to be the Kenya Revenue Authority. Then we heard about the procurement officers who I understand were sent home and substantially came back. We do not know how those lifestyle audits were done, by who, where, using what instrument, and for what purpose, and what were the outcomes. We don't know. The fight against corruption is primarily one about transparency. So if you do things in the dark, you can never hope to have an impact in the open. So I think, for me, we should consider that a missed opportunity and recreate another opportunity for us to conduct a proper lifestyle audit. That way, we will be able to put people on the spot. But as long as these things are done behind the scenes, and that those who are politically influential, economically influential, can always determine what comes out of that, who goes through that process, and what the public gets to know, then it's an action in futility. Yeah. So overall, I would say, and this is where I agree, the prosecutions are good and we welcome them. We don't want to pour cold water on what the DCI and what the DPP are doing in this work. It's part of what we must do to do a fight against corruption, in fact, to fight against corruption. Okay. But I agree with Steve here that it is a small part. But in our context, in our political context, it's really important, because if you are going to convince Kenyans that you are engaged in a fight against corruption, they want to see people behind bars and they want to see people's assets recovered. Okay. If we don't get that, we can do all the drama, generate all the political heat that there can be. It's not going to yield anything. All right.
Jerotich, you wanted to respond to what Steve has said, and I also want to bring your attention to still the front page of the Standard. Treasury knew suspect county budgets 1 year ago. Director of IFMIS was informed about the wrong allocation in January last year, but never acted until February this year, raising questions whether money was lost. So either someone is incompetent or corrupt or both.
Okay, thanks. Really, thank you, Steve. I agree with you by and large. I disagree with some things you've said, Irungu, my brother. But I want to just make one thing very clear. Until we have electoral justice, we cannot say that the ballot is an effective way to choose and to choose our leaders and to therefore fight corruption. Until today, the servers have not been open. Until today, we have not addressed the rampant corruption that took place that subverted my vote, your vote, everybody's vote. So if you tell me I need to go to the ballot so that I can end corruption and so that I can choose my leaders, it does not work. And we have had successive elections where there's always some kind of issue. And at the end of the day, I feel that my voice does not count at the ballot. I also want to say something about the lifestyle audit, and I agree with my brother that if we do not create new parameters for the lifestyle audit, without fail, the 6 trillion odd shillings or so that are squirreled somewhere outside the country will never appear. So if you come to do my lifestyle audit and I've deliberately sequestered my funds in other places, my real assets. So you can come and find me in my humble mansion in Runda and say, well, yes, this looks more or less commensurate, but I know that I have a lot of money out there. Sure. Then it's lip service, it's window dressing, it's to make us feel better. And finally, in terms of the war on corruption, we can only come down to the granular level. What is the impact of corruption on taxpayers, on my pocket, on my ability to afford fuel, on my ability to afford electricity? That for me is the meter to see whether the war on corruption is actually being won, because every single shilling that is stolen from government coffers and put into somebody else's pocket ends up being taxed, being paid for by me, the taxpayer. So the more expensive my cost of living, the more it is evident to me that the war on corruption isn't being fought at all.
Okay. And of course, our viewers can always weigh in on this discussion. Remember, 2242 is our SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. You can also call in as well. The essential numbers are
0719777777. You can tweet at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, at Wega Moura. In fact, we have one coming through to our studio. Let's read it fast before we move on. Mzee Kaya says no one is fighting corruption. All arms of government are just backing at corruption.
Is it helping Irungu to talk about corruption, do you think?
I mean, I think it is helping.
Some would say there's almost a futility to it now. If people out there feel no one's actually fighting it, then
I would encourage
Kenyans
to be a bit more bold and a bit more angry, and therefore to continue to focus on this as a epidemic or as a virus that is actually existentially a threat to this country, right? So the more that we feel that there is nothing happening, the more we will just crawl back into our little holes and actually declare that nothing's happening. Just to give you an example, we are at this moment only discussing the state-led war against corruption. Where is the conversation about the whistleblowers, the auditors who broke the 5 billion shilling Mafia House scandal? Where is the conversation around Beatrice Waithera and Boniface Mwangi, who risked their lives and their freedoms to be able to bring this to the Kenyan attention? Where is the where is the discussion around journalists and the editors who have made sure that this issue does not disappear from our newspapers? And I think this is also the fight against corruption, and this is also what needs to happen. There are young people, for example, 2 days ago, I think it was a day ago, they were in Runda, basically reclaiming Nairobi County government land from private developers. There are head teachers who routinely blow the whistle on land grabbing in public schools. So I think for me, to declare that it is dead, the fight against corruption is dead, is not only defeatist, but actually produces a sense of cynicism and resignation.
So you're
that actually we can do nothing about corruption.
You're seeing small pockets of hope here and there that...
I'm seeing a country that is being devastated by corruption and is angry about it, and there is a small community of people who continue to organize around it. And I don't want them to feel that it is inevitable, or rather the defeat is basically inevitable. We have to encourage these moments. We have to encourage a muscle within the country that says, when you go to the polls, do not elect somebody who has been adversely mentioned in a constitutional commission. Do not elect somebody who has fraudulently got their university papers. That's the muscle that produces the active citizens that generates the change that we need.
All right. Okay. Let's bring in more feedback coming through to our viewers on Twitter, at Citizen TV Kenya, and Trevor Mbija, at Wega Moura. Hashtag is Daybreak. Let's read some of them also coming through right now.
Ali Mkabana, we Kenyans are almost hypocrites when it comes to voting. We vote for these corrupt guys. After we voted, tunaanza tena kulialia ati mara huyu ni mfisadi, mara huyu yuko vile. Kama huu si unafikiria what?
Okay, that last part doesn't make sense, but we get what
that's called creative Kiswahili.
Kama huu si
that must be autocorrect.
I don't know what happened there.
Autocorrect.
Send another SMS. Go ahead, Trevor.
Peter says, you are right, Steve Ogola. Graft is effectively fought at the ballot. Nobody can do it for us. It's voters who can do it. Politicians cannot.
Steve, let me read something here, so that Kenyans can document this, because they may think that we are just speaking out of rage, and which is not sustained or substantiated by the law. This is what the Constitution says. Article 132, Sub-Article 2. The President may appoint and dismiss. You see, he has the decisional independence to appoint and dismiss without any reason. So he can't hide under the judicial process is continuing. If he thinks that you have served 2 years and that's enough for you, he will dismiss you. Appoint and dismiss all CSS, the Attorney General, the principal secretaries, and any other public officer that the law allows him to appoint and dismiss. Effectively, he's the head of the executive. Corruption is steeped in the executive. He has done nothing.
Yeah.
He has fired no one. So in terms of political accountability, if you're talking about sustaining their own corruption, if the president was honest, and you know the problem with this country is that people try to play safe. They don't want to offend the powers that be. They don't want to say it because next time you might need the presidency to endorse something you're doing. So they're unable to express themselves fully in terms of, I'm only reading the Constitution, the president saying that the Constitution mandates you to appoint and fire anybody. And you know, all these corruption scandals, all of them, I've already said, are organized along some ministries that have people that are responsible for them.
Yeah.
Why can't he fire?
You've said an interesting statement, and I just want to get more from that, on that from you. Effectively, he's the head of the executive.
The buck stops with him.
The executive is steeped
in corruption.
Why did he allow it to get to that?
Yeah. You know,
what's your assessment of that?
So to corner Kenyans to believe that the war on corruption is being fought in the courts is to misdirect the public. Show me a constitutional provision that says before the president dismisses someone for political accountability, he has to refer to the courts. The judicial process, and I've said this time and again, and we can't overemphasize it, is for establishing criminal culpability. Echesa was fired. He has not been charged. If he was charged, that's a separate process.
Okay.
He need not to be charged. What I'm saying is that the president has failed.
Why?
But also,
He has failed because he himself is riding on a corrupt infrastructure, and I said it's oxymoronic. You know, I can only empathize with Uhuru Kenyatta. I mean, we have reached a point where now we have to tell him the truth. We can only empathize with Uhuru Kenyatta because he is in power through a corrupt infrastructure.
Given
and it's even worse, huh?
Yeah. I mean, he can't fight corruption.
What do you think? Steve is actually making an important point. It's not so much the inability to fire people. It is the ability to appoint people with questionable records. If you look at the range of appointments, whether it be embassies or whether it be parastatals or whether it be ministries, and just do a digital analysis of these folks, many of them do not have clear records of integrity, or do they have clear records of fighting corruption? Now the question is, if you appoint people with those questionable backgrounds, what are you expecting them to do once you give them ministries to run?
I think I should make a point here. And the point is that I agree with Steve. The bigger part of fighting corruption is about leadership and political leadership. The institution of the presidency and the infrastructure around it is very important in helping us advance on any question, not just corruption, on any question. That's why when we have threats from Al-Shabaab, the president takes leadership in his position as the commander-in-chief. You know, so the presidency is not weak, and the presidency is not without options. The point to make is that the president has allowed himself to be misdirected, or he has misdirected himself, that to fire people from positions into which he has appointed them is to pronounce guilt on them. But guilt is within the realm of criminal law.
Exactly.
And the purpose of criminal law is to apportion guilt or innocence for purposes of punishment, not for purposes of leadership, for purposes of punishment. The right standard is an integrity standard. Are you fit, in accordance with our constitution, particularly chapter 6, to hold public office? That standard is not a criminal standard, it's an ethical standard. So when we descend down to a criminal standard, we are saying that even if the devil walked through the door, we will give him any position in this country, and we will not give apologies for it.
All right. Jerotich, you want to jump in real quick? We're about to take a break. Yeah.
Permit me to say that you asked the question, why isn't the president actually asking? I would ask, does the presidency have a stake? And it's a very loaded question.
A stake in the current state of affairs.
In the current state of affairs, because you could say, arguably, anybody coming from whichever angle, I will say that the Ministry of Energy is arguably one of the most corrupt ministries and flawed ministries. And even though we have not yet said so-and-so is guilty, the perception and the reality is that it is. So when we ask, why won't the president take action? in terms of the Ministry of Energy. My only question back to him would be, does the presidency have a stake? What is it that has hamstrung you, that has made it impossible for you to step forward and say, to show and to demonstrate and to indicate that I'm very serious about this, regardless of the jurisprudence that will follow thereafter or not, I will take action. So I am left with very big question marks. Who has a stake in the corruption? Is this why the individuals or the institution, the presidency, for example, has refused to take action? That's my question to President Uhuru Kenyatta. But what's your stake in it?
The other counter to that, Jerotich, would be perception and facts. Because we remember there was a time the president asked even one of the former CEO of EACC, and he said, "We're lucky, we're unataka nifanye nini?" Because he gave a list and even suspended those people based on what they said. The moment those cases got to court, they all fizzled out. There was no solid evidence. Made him look bad. So is it an institutional breakdown and not just the executive, like we're saying? Because if there's perception and then there's facts. Someone can say that this ministry is corrupt, but do you have enough evidence for that?
I operate on the basis of facts. So when I say the ministry is corrupt, we have the facts. And at the end of the day, if it ends up in court and there is the argument that there is a level of judicial or capture of the judiciary, then of course it'll fizzle. If you're looking at the investigation angle, look at the case of the transformers linked to Kenya Power and Lighting. Somehow the DCI bungled the case, and eventually the ODPP did not proceed, or it's somewhere and it'll fizzle and it'll disappear. So yes, we have facts, but the question is, how seriously does the judiciary take the facts and respond appropriately? How seriously does the executive take the facts? So I don't operate on just perception, but the perception is clear. For those who don't have the facts, they have a gut feeling. They say something is wrong because it has an impact on my pocketbook. It has an impact on my ability to buy units, to pay my electricity bill. Something is wrong, but we have facts. Are the facts taken on board? The president urged us to blow the whistle. We're blowing the whistle. Day in, day out, zero, silence, no action.
Nobody's
Trevor, allow me, if you will.
Brief statement, because we need to take a break.
I just need to take it over from where she is left and to say that for purposes of leadership and integrity in leadership, I do not need to have those facts. The courts can determine those facts for purposes of determining guilt or innocence. Or I know as a citizen, if Steve is the accounting officer in a ministry and the Auditor General tells me year in, year out that money cannot be accounted for in that ministry, I don't need to say he's corrupt. I just need to say he's not accountable and therefore is not fit to hold that office. And for the person who is in charge of that edifice at the top, they should be the ones asking those questions about where the money is. But this report shows us money cannot be accounted for. And as a citizen, the only way I can say that money is not stolen if there's evidence produced to show the money was properly spent. But as it is, that evidence doesn't come. Nobody asks questions. The president, parliament, all of them keep quiet.
Okay.